Hey guys, thanks for joining us here at Salty Ginger Talk. If you're a returning listener, it's great to have you back. If you're new to the channel, really glad you joined us. Hope you like what you hear. So today we're going to give you 5 words or phrases that escalate emotion. And so we want to avoid using these words or phrases, and we're going to give you substitutes for these words and phrases that you can use to make difficult or charged conversations de-escalate and become collaborative and problem-solving conversations. So let's just jump into the episode from there, right? The words we're talking about today don't just create conflict, they actually activate your brain's threat response. That makes the other person generally defensive, it makes them angry, or it makes them shut down. That's not where we want to go if we want to have a collaborative conversation and get to a good outcome. But the good news is that we're going to give you science backed replacements that calm the conversation down and move it toward a collaborative outcome, which is what we're looking for. So that's the whole point of the episode. We're going to give you the science behind it. We're going to give you words and phrases to avoid, and we're going to give you words and phrases to replace those that will help you get to a better outcome in your conversations. So let's just get into all that information right now. Why is it that some words trigger emotional escalation? Neuroscience 101. When a person hears a phrase that feels blaming, absolute, or dismissive, that activates their amygdala. The amygdala is where our fight or flight response emanates from in our brain. It lights up when anyone hears phrases that feel blaming, absolute, or dismissive. So those are the types of words and phrases that we want to avoid using, because when people hear those, it triggers defensiveness, it triggers emotional flooding in their brain, it triggers poor listening, it triggers reactive communication instead of reasoned communication, and it triggers fight or flight behaviors because it's literally coming from the part of your brain responsible for fight or flight. These words or phrases activate that part of someone's brain, and we're trying to not activate that part of their brain and activate the logic and reasoning part of their brain, which is called the prefrontal cortex, instead. Because once the amygdala is activated, logic shuts down and argument, defense, survival takes over. Harvard has a negotiation project, and one of the things Harvard does at their business schools is teaches people how to have difficult conversations and negotiations. In whatever form you can think about this from a relationship perspective, a professional perspective, doesn't matter. We're relating person to person. And so they try to teach people how to be successful in those conversations. They call these phrases hot words. They call these words hot words because they derail dialogue almost immediately, if not immediately. And your goal in communication should be to keep the other person's brain in their prefrontal cortex, which again is the part of the brain responsible for problem solving and collaboration. So, with all that said, that is the science. These words and phrases we're going to tell you not to use trigger the amygdala to fire up. We don't want that to happen. We want the prefrontal cortex to stay in charge. So we're going to give you words and phrases that will keep the prefrontal cortex engaged and not engage the amygdala. That's the whole science behind it. Let's jump into our words and phrases. Number 1, global statements. You always, you never, do not make global statements. Absolute statements, global statements, whatever you want to call them. You always, you never. When someone hears this, their brain hears them as global attacks on their character, not specific behaviors. It triggers defensiveness because they feel inaccurate and unfair. It's an emotional response to these words. Instead of saying you always or you never, you could try one of these 2 phrases. I've noticed this pattern and I would like to understand it better. And then lay out the behavior, the pattern that you've noticed. Or, here's what I'm experiencing. Can we talk about it? That's not accusatory. That's problem solving. That's asking them to collaborate with you to talk through a situation. Those phrases focus on behavior, not on character. And that's why they work differently than you always or you never. So let's start there. Global statements, keep them out of your vocabulary. Not a good place to be. Not good phrases to use when you're having conversations with people, especially conversations that you think or could become difficult. Okay? Number 2, and this one should be very obvious, but we're going to put it in here anyways because it's very important. Calm down. If you want to ever use a phrase that has the exact opposite effect that you're trying to have, Calm down is that phrase. Telling someone to calm down immediately makes them less calm. Emotion researchers call this emotional invalidation. It communicates to them that their feelings are unwelcome or irrational. The amygdala hears, "You're wrong to feel this way." And so it instantly creates the opposite effect that we're trying to have. Instead, you can say, "Help me understand what you're feeling." Real straightforward. Help me understand. Explain it to me. That takes it out of emotion and into logic. It's okay to feel what you're feeling. Let's work through it. Validate that it's okay that they're feeling the way they're feeling, but we can't stay there. We've got to work through it and get to a logical outcome or a collaborative outcome, right? Validation lowers the emotional intensity, and it allows you to steer the conversation back to a place where we can re-engage the prefrontal cortex and get them thinking in terms of problem solving and facts and solutions instead of emotions. Want to get it out of the amygdala, back to the prefrontal cortex. Okay, number 3, that's not a big deal or you're overreacting. Nope, we're not using those phrases. Not good at all. Those phrases dismiss the other person's internal experience. They may be way out in left field. They may be full of shit. They may be reading the situation extremely wrong. Does not matter. That is not the point. The point is, in relationships and in leadership, validation is everything. When you dismiss, it amplifies the emotional pain and breaks trust with the person that you're interacting with. That's not where we want to be as leaders, whether it be husbands or fathers or wives or mothers or leaders in business or in church or wherever we interact with other people. We want to show leadership. Leaders validate. Here's what I'm hearing from you. Got it. I'm not saying you're wrong at all to feel that way, but let's work through it and get to a better spot. So instead of "that's not a big deal" or "you're overreacting," what we can say is, "Seems like this has really affected you. Tell me more about it." Or, "Tell me what part of this feels the hardest to you." That again forces them to look at it from a logical, rational standpoint, which re-engages prefrontal cortex, disengages amygdala. Again, it moves the conversation from emotion to perspective to problem solving. And we want to wind up at problem solving if we're going to get to a good outcome. Okay, number 4, why would you do that? Why did you do that? That escalates because someone feels questioned. Their brain perceives it as an interrogation or a judgment. That's not what we want people to feel when we're talking to them. You still need to find out what's driving this behavior, but that's not the way to do it. That way triggers shame, which is one of the strongest emotional activators and is going to make people defensive. It's going to make the amygdala continue to fire and stay strong in that conversation, because shame shuts down reasoning and it makes people defensive or withdrawn. Instead of "why would you do that" or "why did you do that?" Again, let's go back to "help me understand." Help me understand what was going through your mind in this situation. Help me understand what your thought process was. Well, here's another one. Walk me through what happened from your point of view. Explain it to me. Use logic, use reason, draw on facts. Get away from the emotion, back to the collaboration, back to the problem-solving part of the brain. Curiosity has now replaced judgment, and we can have a conversation that could be productive. So we've got to avoid "why would you do that? Why did you do that?" Very accusatory, triggers shame, triggers emotion. We want to move back to "help me understand." Help me understand brings it back to facts, brings it back to logic, brings it back to collaboration. Okay, number 5, you should or you need to. These phrases create a power imbalance and trigger resistance in the listener. People naturally push back when they feel controlled. This is called reactance, which is a well-documented psychological phenomenon. The moment someone hears "you should," their autonomy feels threatened and they react emotionally. Amygdala kicks in. Instead of "you should" or "you need to," "Hey, I've got a thought. Would you like to hear it? Can I offer you a thought?" That's a phrase. "Would you be open to a suggestion?" That's a phrase. "Here's what I found helpful." Does that resonate? There's a phrase. "I can share my experience if that's helpful." That's a phrase. All of those are much better solutions or much better alternatives to "you should" or "you need to." "You should" or "you need to" has a connotation that you were wrong. Here's the right way to do it. Even if that's true, even if that's what you're trying to convey, a better way to get them to follow you to where you want them to go is to use the phrases we suggested. "Can I offer a thought? Would you be open to a suggestion? Here's what I've experienced myself. Is that helpful? I can share what I have had, experiences I've had in this particular subject or issue, if that's helpful. This approach protects their autonomy and it makes collaboration possible. Okay? So, those are 5 phrases to avoid. We've given you alternative phrases to use in those situations. Here's some more science-backed tools that you can use to de-escalate any situation. Use I statements instead of you statements. This prevents blame and it shifts the focus to personal experience. I feel threatened when you act that way. I've noticed that when this set of circumstances happen, you tend to have this reaction. I feel this. I saw that, right? It's fact-based. It's not emotion-based. Personal experience instead of blame. Match their emotion, then lead them down. You got to be careful with this one, but sometimes if someone is really far out there, you've got to go up there with them for a minute and then get them to follow you back down to a better spot. I'm not a huge fan of this because I typically tend to go the opposite of people's emotions. We'll talk about that in a little bit, but this will work in some instances. In some instances, it's necessary to get through to the person just to get them to listen to you. So this emotional regulation technique is called affect labeling. It shows empathy and it helps reduce emotional intensity. By you matching, they see that you get the sense of urgency that they're feeling and they're more apt to listen to you. Again, you got to be careful with this one. I don't use this one a lot, but it exists and I wanted to make sure you were aware of it. What I do are like number 3 and number 4. 3 is slow your tone and lower your volume. So the more excited and loud someone gets, and they tend to talk faster when they're in that state, I tend to lower my voice, slow the cadence of my words, and lower my tone. The nervous system of the other person will tend to match your nervous system, which is why I'm not a big fan of match their emotions and then bring them down. I like to start low and try to get them to follow me down from there. But this technique of lowering your tone and showing the opposite energy of the person you're interacting with is called co-regulation. This has worked really well for me. It's my go-to in difficult situations, and I have found it has worked really well for me when I'm in these situations. And I tend to be in these situations a lot because I've been in leadership positions for 35 years of my life. And so leadership positions are typically involved in conflict resolution, involved in settling disputes, involved in corrective conversations. And so I've got a lot of experience with these, and these are the ones that work for me. The next one that works really well for me is asking questions instead of making accusations. Questions activate the prefrontal cortex. Accusations activate the amygdala. So if you suspect something is going on, you can just say, hey, I want to talk about this subject. I want to get your perspective on it. Have you noticed this? Were you there when this happened? Did you see this happen? Were you aware that this was happening? Those are questions that focus on events, that focus on facts. It keeps the emotion out of it, and it brings the prefrontal cortex in and focuses people on facts and logics and problem solving. That's worked really well for me in my conflict resolution conversations. So we're going to give you action items here to put all this into play. It's not a lot, but it's easy to forget when the bullets start flying because let's remember, these are typically more emotional conversations. They're typically higher stakes conversations. They're typically more charged conversations. And it's not easy to do if we try to eat the whole elephant all at once. So let's just take some action steps to implement these things into our life. Action step number 1 is to replace one of our 5 aggressive phrases with a de-escalation phrase this week. Find a spot where you can use this and practice it this week, right now. Action step number 2 is just to take a pause. We talk about this so much on the podcast. So many arguments or confrontations can be de-escalated if you just say nothing for 5 to 10 seconds after someone says something. Just take 3 breaths before you respond. Count to 3. That allows your prefrontal cortex to reboot. Maybe someone's called you a name. Maybe someone's made an accusation towards you. Maybe they're trying to start a fight with you. If you can de-escalate your brain, take the breath, engage the prefrontal cortex, respond from reason and fact instead of emotion, you're going to be in a much better spot. Action step number 3 is we're going to end every emotional conversation with one sentence. That sentence is, here's what I heard you say, repeat what you heard, and then say, is that right? Recap what you heard. That makes the listener understand that you understood them completely, and it makes them feel heard. It prevents misunderstandings, and it instantly lowers tension because they know you're listening to them. They know you're engaged in the conversation. You might not agree with them. You're not agreeing with them at all. You're just recapping what you heard them say. Now they know you heard it. Now they know that it's in your head. Now they know that they can talk to you about it, and it lowers the intensity immediately when you do that. Action step number 4 is to practice curiosity daily. Assume good intent first. It changes everything. How many times have you been in a circumstance where there's been a fact or a statement or an action, and it could be interpreted one of two ways? One way is very positive. One way is very negative. Many people tend to go to the negative assumption first. Let's not do that. Let's assume good intent first and ask a lot of questions. If we flesh out when we're asking those questions that their intent was bad, okay, now we've got to deal with that. But if it was good, we've now avoided an unnecessary confrontational or charged conversation simply by assuming good and asking questions. That's a technique you can use starting right now. It's super easy to do. You just got to keep it in the front of your mind to do it. Okay? So, in closing, we've got to remember that the words we choose can escalate tension or build connection. As leaders, we want to build connection and de-escalate tension. Our words can trigger defensiveness, or invite collaboration. Clearly, we want to discourage defensiveness and invite collaboration. Communication is a skill, and the people who master it win. They win in relationships, they win in leadership, and they win in life. Being able to effectively communicate with people across broad spectrums, across different socioeconomic backgrounds, across different cultures, across different races, it is the key to success. And to be successful, we need to avoid the reactive, emotionally loaded phrases that we talked about and use the curious, calm, collaborative ones we talked about instead. Incorporate these things into your repertoire and watch how much better you get at communicating with and interacting with people. This approach will change your life if you focus on it. We promise. We've been using these things for decades. They work. We gave you the science behind why they work. You don't need to second guess it. You can research it on your own. We always encourage that. You're going to wind up right back here where we're talking about right now. So start working on these things now and watch how much better you get in these situations. Okay, James puts it up over here every day. Head over to our website, saltygingertalk.com. All of our podcast episodes are available there. Links to our social media accounts are available there. We publish a newsletter every weekday you can subscribe to on our website. Make sure you like, share, comment, subscribe to our podcast on whatever platform you consume it on. We have guests that come on and talk about what they've learned, the lessons they've learned, and how they've used those lessons to build really successful lives with deep relationships, with great meaning, with great purpose. We do episodes like this that help you live a better life and have better outcomes in the relationships and interactions you have with other people. It's all good stuff. We keep seeing our subscribers grow. We keep seeing our views grow. We want to keep bringing you this quality content so it will help you get to the life you want to live. In order to do that, we can really use your help to subscribe and keep coming back, checking out the podcast. So make sure you catch our next episode. We'll see you there.